how often do you come across someone in our industry going through the process of getting their branding registered and IP protected and so forth?
Well, in your industry in particular, no one really thinks about branding only because it's a services industry.
Right.
Most of the clients that export overseas are products.
Yeah.
So, you've got the Unilevers or the Coca-Colas where it's product-based and their brand is really important and they don't want the reputation to be tarnished. They don't want any copycats. So they definitely, a lot of them would trademark before they even go to market.
Right.
And the reason for that is that logistically, if you can imagine, if Coca-Cola launched a new product, they don't actually want their competitors to know what the new name is.
Yes.
Secondly, they don't want to infringe on another brand's
because they'll open up lawsuits and all that sort of stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
So these large companies have the resources of lawyers and branding agencies to find that unique name for them, and they take the time because they see it as important. Imagine Coca-Cola having to recall products from around the world. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So the thing is, it's trademarking or intellectual property are not just for the large companies.
Yes.
It's actually quite affordable for the small companies. Right. But the small companies don't really think about it because it's not at the forefront of their, of when they're looking at launching a new brand or service. So reality is what happens is when someone's starting a new business, they go see an accountant or lawyer to set up their business, their company name. And then the accountant would say, I've got the asset company name for you, go ahead and open your stores or launch your product. But the accountants are looking at your tax and your structure. They're not really looking at your brand. So it's not their job to understand branding protection.
Yes.
So a lot of the time I spend a lot trying to educate small business owners that actually the trademark trumps your company name. It trumps your domain name.
Yeah.
It even trumps your sales history.
Yeah.
So you could be trading for all these years thinking that you've got protection because you've got a company name. That's completely false.
Yes.
And time again, that has been debunked because there's been, I think there was one lawsuit a couple of years ago where No. 5 chocolate was, sued by Chanel.
Right.
Because No. 5, and Chanel's trying to bully us, know.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, Chanel has spent so much money, investing in the No. 5 brand that even though they don't produce chocolate, they don't want to be associated with.
But they still have the reach.
That's right.
Wow.
And the thing was, I think they didn't actually copy Chanel.
Right.
Apparently, they were on No. 5 Church Street or some street in Adelaide, and so therefore they just said, "Oh, we'll just call a brand No. 5 chocolate."
Right.
Not really thinking about Chanel.
Right.
And it was only years later that Chanel went, "Oh no, we don't like it."
Well, they must be doing well for it to be on the radar of Chanel.
Well, not really. Those big companies have got lawyers.
Right.
And actually, by the way, a trademark attorney in Australia is not a lawyer.
Right.
So I'm not.
Right, okay.
And a patent attorney also isn't a lawyer as well.
Right.
They've got lawyers there monitoring the database, and they just want to make sure that they can enforce their brand, so they will just send you a cease and desist letter.
Was they successful in this case? Because I would imagine, I'm guessing that the No. 5 chocolate wasn't trademarked.
No, it wasn't trademarked.
Right.
So basically, any small business owner would be bonkers to go to court against a big company. Yes. So they did actually rebrand without having to go to court.
Right.
So, but the fact is that when you start a business, you got to think about these things. Don't copy big brands.
Yes.
Make sure that the brand that you've come up with is trademarkable, that it's unique.
Right.
You're first to use it. You're first to trademark it.
Yes.
And those are the things that need to be considered before you even go and see your accountant to get your company name. And by looking at that just on Australia level, it actually then gets more complicated going overseas, because now you've got to look at that name, not just in Australia, but around the world or in the countries you want to enter to make sure that it's available.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a client years ago that had a board game. We got the trademark for them in Australia. Then they wanted to expand to the US. We couldn't get that name.
Right.
So we created a new name. And now there's a new brand. And then they want to go to the UK. Instead of having one brand with the same product, they've got 3 brands in 3 different countries.
So how can a company who's expanding overseas and so forth secure the one name to cover all geographies or markets?
Sometimes they can't.
They can't.
No, they can't unless they make up a name.
Right.
And I specialize in that area because
Right.
I've got, I've worked in marketing in my previous life. I've got a master's of business and marketing, and now I'm a trademark attorney. So I've got trademark expertise. So having those 2 skill sets actually is beneficial because often my clients come to me and they'll give me a name they want, and they might say, I just want to be in Australia, or they'll say, I want to be in Australia and I want to be in Malaysia. I will actually look at those names, and if it's too close to something else, I'll say, let's brainstorm. Let's find a unique name that is trademarkable in those 2 countries.
Right. The question I have in my mind is that we've identified that SMEs often don't think about trademarking anything.
Yes.
Right? Because that's not their focus.
Yes.
For the obvious reasons, I guess, tight budgets and our focus on our products, all that stuff. Then how do you go from that reality to get a small and medium-sized enterprise to think about, like the early days, which is what we're talking about?
Yes.
We need to consult someone such as yourself with our branding and name. Isn't that a leap too far? And how do we bridge that?
Well, it's actually not that expensive as you found to trademark in Australia.
Right.
I mean, including my fees and government fees, you're looking at like $260 a year to protect your brand.
Right.
You might have to pay it up front.
Yes.
But when we average out over 10 years, because that's what an average trademark protection is.
Right.
Very affordable.
So it's $260 per year.
Yeah,
Right.
pretty much.
Okay.
I mean, based on my fees. But,
And plus your service fees as well, of course. Yes.
No. That includes my service
So that includes your service fees. Wow.
Oh, I must be too cheap.
By that, you've sort of answered my question, I guess.
It's not. So the misconception is intellectual property trademarking is not affordable.
That's right.
So affordable.
That's right.
And the examples I can give of clients, if they just rang someone that knew what they were looking for in the trademark register, it would have saved them a lot of money having to rebrand later. Because as you know, every time especially if you're going overseas, you're putting a lot of money, upfront investment into the brand, the packaging, the strategy.
If you make something like shoes, you've got to pay for all the molds.
Yes, that's right.
You get the mold wrong with the wrong name on it, and then name's wrong. You have to go back and pay thousands of dollars just to remake the mold.
That's right. And that's what I'm saying is that they should be, like, even if you're just doing it in Australia, launching the product or service in Australia, take a step back because it actually only will probably delay you a couple of weeks.
Yes.
And you've got to work with someone that has that knowledge.
Right.
Okay. That's also willing to go on a limb to be able to say, I think you need to steer away from that because it's possibly going to infringe. I mean, nothing we do is guaranteed at the end of the day.
Yeah.
At the same time, we've got our expertise that guides them to the best solution.
Yeah.
And so that's, for me, part of the reason why I've gone into my own practice recently again is that I found that I actually want to make sure that the client starts their brand on the right footing. So even if it might take me a couple of weeks to work with them to get the branding right, I will do that.
Mm-hmm.
My fees are fixed. And so therefore, it just makes me feel happy that I'm able to help the business and to have them create that brand. And I am so joyful when the brand is approved. And over the years, like your brand has grown. It just makes my job really rewarding at the end of the day to see it grow.
And I think part of it is to get people to understand. And most of it, people, they don't understand through lack of, I guess, what we're trying to achieve here, right? Which is education.
Education.
Right? And to bring the good folks of the SME world up to speed with what something costs. Because most think, that must be expensive, which is a false sort of
It's a myth.
illusion, myth, right? And you debunk it and say, it's affordable.
It's affordable.
And it doesn't take much. It just, if you really care about your product and your company, which is, let's face it, all SME owners, we're putting our skin in the game.
Yes.
So I think as long as people understand that, I think more adoption will come through.
Yeah, that's right. And I actually say not everyone needs a trademark, right? And I say that if you start a brand and someone a year later, 2 years later, comes and says, stop using that brand because you're infringing on my mark. Well, at that stage, if you say, okay, I don't care about my brand, I'll change my brand tomorrow, then you don't need a trademark because you're not valuing your brand. But if you value the brand that you've started and you put all your effort, your sweat, your money, your reputation, you want to protect it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so it's as simple as that.
So touching on what I touched on just a bit earlier, I think for me, getting your brand protected is just sends the right signals to the right people.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with people getting to a business, getting a product or whatever company you want to do, just create it, blow it up and flip it. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
You know, power to them. But then other people, then when you see someone who has their branding trademarked and registered, it tells you, okay, this person's in it for a long haul.
Yes.
That person has a longer vision in terms of what he wants that product or her product to become. And that helps me identify the people I work with.
And you would go through the steps, and you would also tell them what the roadblocks could be, and you give them the best options. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what all three of us are doing.
Yes.
It's giving our expertise to our clients that require that information, and we are guiding them because we're doing this every day. I mean, I wouldn't know what to do in your industry or vice versa. So I'm a big believer about going to the right expert consultant.
Yes.
Because without that, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Why would you want to make a mistake? I mean, I really love it when the client comes to me and I go, you can't trademark that. Let me help you find a new name. Because I know I've just saved them a lot of money.